Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, honored guests. Excuse me. We are here today gathered to pay respects to those who perished during the Shoah and also to the liberators. Unfortunately, our plans had to be altered as everything is shut down during the virus that is going around the world over. Therefore, I am not speaking to you from Greenwood Cemetery in front of the beautiful monument. And I just want to make sure that we don't ignore this very important chapter in our history. So let me tell you a little something about myself. My name is Ilse Reiner, my maiden name Eichner. I was the only child of Max and Charlotte. We lived in Setten, a small charming town, Moravia, part of the former Czechoslovakia. Well, let me just tell you a little something about that. Mainly that Czechoslovakia was non-existent until after World War I. And when it was established, democracy was patterned according to the Constitution of the United States. The democracy was short-lived, 20 years total. And then Hitler took over. And I myself had witnessed the Germans marching in on that sad day. We suddenly were no longer Czechoslovakia, but became the protectorate of Moravia and Bohemia. Slovakia became an independent state. The Germans marched into town to the sound of a drum. They declared on the main square that we simply have to obey by the new rules of the new regime. German language was instituted in the schools. Monuments of the Czech patriots were removed, and pictures of Hitler and flags with the swastika were everywhere. Before long, the businesses of the Jewish people were padlocked, and the signs went up saying that the establishment was under pure Aryan control. The Germans were persecuting the Christians as well as the Jews at that particular time. And there were many who ended up in jail for questioning. And some were tortured. My mother and father were in and out of the local jails and then sent further. At one point, I had gone to the Gestapo headquarters and requested respectfully a permission to be able to visit my mother, who was sitting 2 buildings further down in a small town jail. Well, at first I got yelled at for not looking Jewish. Then I was told that I must speak German since I knew the language. Fine, no problem. I didn't wink an eye and I obeyed. Especially since when I looked over to the side, I saw citizens standing up against the wall, facing the wall. Yes, they were there for a hearing, and obviously they were not forthcoming with the answers that the Germans wanted. So they had to face the wall for hours and hours. Another fellow, unknown to me by name, was running up and down the stairs with a heavy chair on his back. And of course, all this was puzzling to me. However, I was thrilled to get the permission to visit my mom. It was very, very emotional. And at that particular time, I didn't realize that it was so long forever. We never saw each other again. She was sent to Bremen for 6 weeks, thereafter taken out of the country and imprisoned in Ravensbrück, the first camp for political women prisoners. She was discharged a year and a half later, temporarily, I was told, because she contracted tuberculosis. At any rate, February 27, she passed away peacefully in a Prague hospital, surrounded by Jewish nurses and doctors. Life had been moving very fast. We kids got introduced to new vocabulary that we didn't know before. Pardon me. Words such as partisan, sabotage, espionage were being heard, informers, and on and on. People were listening secretly to the Voice of America, and we kids had to be very careful not to divulge that this was going on in our homes, or the parent would have been picked up and thrown into jail right then and there. A lot was going on. That's hard to describe. Some of it you already know. Jewish children were tossed out of school, and we started to wear the Star of David. The transports were not forthcoming as yet. That took place later on. My father was sent to Lublin, and later on I received a postcard saying that all is well and he's doing fine. I found out after the war that the postcards were written after the prisoners from that particular transport were done away with, and I was told that that took place in a camp called Sobibor. Well, now, since we are talking about the survivors and also the liberators, I'd like to share a story with you which is rather poignant in my opinion. Judge for yourself. There was a soldier once with the 9th Infantry Division. He fought valiantly throughout Africa, all over Europe. He happened to help to liberate Dachau under Eisenhower, Bradley and Patton, and ended up in Normandy, D+4, Utah Beach. And some many months later, after the war, after World War II has ended, there was a knock on the door of a humble apartment on Arthur Avenue in the Bronx. And when the couple opened the door ever so slightly, they gazed into the face of an unknown woman and man. And they said, yes? And the couple said, good afternoon. We came to meet with you and to thank you. Of course, they introduced themselves and they said, we came to meet you in person and thank you for raising such a fine, fine son who helped to save the life of ours. And the couple on Arthur Avenue looked puzzled. What are they talking about? And who are they? But the curiosity was great, and they asked the visitors to step in and sit down and tell them what they knew. And so they did. And this is what they heard. That one day, there was, when the men were fighting, there was an ambush, and the soldiers in that area were scattering right and left, trying to make a run to a safe area. And one soldier who revered his life, but the life of others as well, turned around just to see what's what. And he saw a soldier lying on the ground, moving ever so slightly, whereas others did not. So he quickly ran back, saw that his guts were hanging out, pushed him in, used some powder, antiseptic, antibiotic, whatever it is that the soldiers were given for an emergency such as that, and sprinkled it over the wound, picked up the fellow and dragged him on his back as quickly as he could to a place which offered them a secure area where to rest, and the medics took over thereafter. Well, the soldier who was the rescuer became my husband a few years later. His name was Charles Reiner, number 158, New York City, the first number drafted during the war by Secretary of War Stimson. And we were married for over 50 years, have 2 children, Richard, who with his family lives in LA, and Elaine, who lives here. And I'm ever so grateful for that. He's been gone for 20 years now, but he left quite a legacy behind. And when I asked him once upon a time what he got his Bronze Star for, he said, for being young and foolish. And I never learned the true story until much, much later. From whom? From my children. And who did they hear it from? From my husband's only and most favorite brother, Carl. This brings me to emphasize the importance of the value of life and of thinking always also of how and what you can do to save the life of somebody else. When I talk to children in school, I would ask them, what is your most precious gift? And one would say to me, my parents. I said, The other one would say, my education. I said, well, that's good. The third one, pardon me, said, a very unique trip that I went on with my family that I will never forget. And I said, well, Johnny, Dan, Mike, whoever, this is all fine. But that is not the most important gift you have. The most important gift you have is your life. Cherish it and cherish that of others as well. And then I started to talk to them about other things. And it just came to me when I was thinking about life in general, which I always consider to be a roller coaster, up and down, good and bad, joyful, sad, a mixed bag. But then suddenly it dawned on me that a quilt is really life. How so? Someone may ask. Well, I tell you, a quilt comes in different sizes. It comes in different shapes. It comes in different colors, just like people do. Have you ever thought about it? It brings you joy to create it. It teaches you patience because it's tedious work. It teaches you to follow through once you get started. And what's more, it gives you comfort. When cold, you get under it and cozy up with it, and it feels ever so good. And so I said to myself, this is good to remember, and there's more to remember, which I like to share with you. And this takes me back for a while to the slave labor camp in Silesia by the name of Kurzbach. Well, when things got very rough, not they were ever wonderful, but there were rougher moments and a little better moments. When it got very rough and I stopped believing in God, I went on for a few days in misery, more so than before. And then I said to myself, wait a minute, what's wrong here? Oh, you have nobody to talk to that would really hear you out the way you needed to be heard out, not just talking to a prisoner about this or that. She had the same problems. So I decided that I'm going to try to reinstate my faith in God, not question so much, why didn't you help to bomb the railroad tracks faster? Why didn't you this? Why didn't you that? He doesn't have to answer me. But the mere fact that I knew that I had somebody that I could address my thoughts to, and that I thought might possibly listen, distracted me a little bit and gave me a little bit more strength and made me realize that for the time being, I had to depend on myself, on my own resourcefulness. Luck played a great part. There's no ifs or buts about it. If you didn't have luck, that was it, c'est la vie. You were doomed. But besides luck, you had to have hope. And hope is something that nobody must ever, ever forget. So I try to think back for a moment on some pleasanter moments in my life, hoping that it will energize me a little bit more. And sure enough, I thought back of the Sabbath in my family. And when Friday night came, my mother would put out a white starch tablecloth with some cross-stitching that she did herself on it. She would bake a challah. She would polish the candlesticks. Well, you know, everything that goes with Sabbath. And not to forget, we always had a carp swimming in a tub, in a bathtub. To some of you, that may be a strange custom, but yes, a lot of people in Europe did it, at least in the eastern countries, as far as I know. So the carp ended up on a table later on. I wouldn't eat it, but I did enjoy the chicken soup and the aroma wafting throughout the kitchen. My father would come home from work. Sometimes he would bring flowers, sometimes not. But the three of us would sit down and have a very lovely Shabbos meal with all the blessings and the proper prayers. And you know, the memory of that, with my eyes closed, made me feel so good and gave me such an uplift for a little while. And then later on some other days, I noticed that there were a group of women talking to each other. Mind you, there were only women and a handful of children who were in this particular place. So I inched up as much as I could without being spotted, not working as diligently as I should have. And they were cooking. They were doing imaginary cookery. And they were baking up a storm. Oh, my goodness gracious. Apfelstrudel and kugelhupf and all kinds of wonderful torts and things that I remember my mom would make for birthdays, and evidently theirs did too. And it was wonderful, wonderful to do that. And we engaged in making up a recipe for a new meal, and there was hope, and there was distraction. And so this is very, very important, because it keeps you going. And, well, what can I say other than life is a gamble, and the choices we make, we may later regret. But on the other hand, if we don't do anything, it may even be worse. So I always felt this way. One had to act quickly and be resourceful. And yes, be willing to take chances. If you don't, nothing will change. If you take a chance with luck, don't forget luck, you just may rise above something and be able to go a little longer and a little longer, and just keep pushing, pushing, and believing that there is a rainbow ahead. And another thing, don't ever say, if I survive, if I this, if I that. Always remember to say when. When I survive, I will do this. When I survive, I will do that. So, my dear friends, family, survivors, people everywhere, please join me in saying L'chaim, to life, for one and all. Amen.